The CPI report, Child Protection in Iowa, is brought to you by Vocal Victims of Child Abuse Laws. You can watch our program on Sunday at 1 o'clock p.m. and Wednesday at 9:30 p.m. in Des Moines. Also, for those who are watching in the Council Bluffs, Omaha area on Cox Channel 23, you can see this program every other Thursday at 4:30 p.m. You can email us at vocaliowa@mchsi.com. My number is 515-276-3956. And John's number here in Des Moines is 515-282-2672. My name is Don Burgmaier, and with me at the controls is my co-host,
John Harvey, and welcome to the CPI report. CPI stands for Child Protection in Iowa, and we have a couple of missions. One is to influence public policy as it relates to child protection issues. Secondly, we like to hold ourselves out to be at least assistance to individuals who are having difficulties with the Department of Human Services and the juvenile court. We're sort of ongoing critics of those two organizations. And I guess maybe we shouldn't say critics. All we are, we just want to foster such an attitude and cooperation and behavior that will make them to be extremely good and helpful agencies. We haven't seen any terribly overwhelming improvement in their behavior, but wouldn't it be nice if their behavior was such that they could get to a point where they could shut down their systems, where people wouldn't need their assistance anymore? It would be great if Vocal could shut down its doors, close down its TV studio, because they weren't needed anymore. Some of those things could happen, but I don't see it in the immediate future, something like that occurring. Well, I have a few thoughts that I'd like to present with respect to the kinds of problems that we have with the Department of Human Services. The Department of Human Services is a gigantic organization, extremely well rooted, and it knows where its funding comes from. It knows how to get in and get the big bucks and to do the influence that it wants to get involved in. We are behaving as families in Iowa in such a way as to totally encourage this big organization of becoming involved in our lives. And I'll mention just two or three things here, and maybe Chapter 2 will be able to get into additional things. Once the child protection system left its noble moorings, it became a significant force with gigantic power and influence. There is little left in the child protection system to remind us that its main task is to protect children. You see, its main task, if you listen to them, if you watched them, is to find more money sources and to extend its influence. Well, according to a conference study conducted at Drake University by former Governor Branstad, it was concluded that children tend to experience well-being in homes in which there is a mother and a father. Why should this be a great surprise? It has served as a successful model for several centuries. You know, someone who is willing to make the income to provide for the family, and someone who is willing to be the chief executive officer of the nest. That seems like to be a pretty good scheme. Anything less than this solid cooperative and committed structure compromises the well-being of children. Other forms created for whatever reason simply invite trouble. The DHS is on the lookout for potential trouble and are willing to invade and to cause even more trouble. See if their procedures are not correct. If they don't guess right, they're going to invade where they need not be and destroy families that would otherwise operate on their own. We call those intact families. There are a number of reasons to believe that the current decline in the system is well ingrained and most likely to be perpetuated. Much of the problem arises from governmental funding initiatives which are counterproductive to the intact family. The breakup and redefinition of the American family will continue to fuel the child protection system. So DHS, it looks like you're in for the long haul. There's no way that we can find a time in which you can retire your agency's efforts, and you can retire your agency's seeking out for more and more taxpayer funds. You're in the long battle for the long haul. Easy divorce laws and forced child support obligations further encourage breakup of the marital commitment, which is the hallmark of any stable family environment. Domestic violence laws, that's DV for short, and feminist promotions plague an already weakened family structure. These laws and government funding and inappropriate techniques combine to perpetuate the decline in societal stability. Widespread availability and use of street drugs is the single most destructive element in our society when we focus on the well-being of children. I learned just recently that something like 80% of all removals from homes by the DHS and the juvenile court is due to allegations of use of drugs. By the way, I should insert at this point that the agency that involves itself in your family and says it's doing so because of your use of drugs, they need to show that your use of drugs is detrimental, directly detrimental to the children. If the children don't know you're using drugs, if there is no effect of your use of drugs on the children, then they need to butt out. That is not an endorsement for the use of drugs. It simply says where government dare not step in. But it does it anyhow, because there are more incentives to remove children and put them in foster care and to adopt them out than there are incentives to assist the family in looking after its weaknesses. And quite often you'll hear this phrase come up in discussions: the children should not be required to wait endlessly for the parents to get their act together. What that assumes is that the children in the meantime are going to be in foster care, away from the protection and guidance and interaction with their own parents. So they should not be in that environment, it is said, endlessly. I think, Don, you had in some of your documents, it's called parentless limbo. We should not permit them to simply float out there. And so now they're under the newer concepts of foster care and placement. We are pulling children out at a faster rate, putting them in foster care, planning to put them back in the home and planning to get them adopted at the same time, because our ideas of scheduling here are so important that we must get all this accomplished at once. And of course, we must separate the parent from child in the meantime, so that we can break those bonds that are so necessary for a stable situation. The breadwinner oftentimes falls prey to a number of obstacles in keeping the family together. He can be accused of domestic abuse and jailed. He can be accused of child abuse, and he can be restrained from seeing his children or occupying his home or driving his vehicle. He can be forced out of his home without probable cause, simply upon the issuance of a no-contact order. The slightest obstruction to a no-contact order can land him in jail facing felony charges. At a time when his protection and guidance of the children is crucial, he is found powerless and defeated, and perhaps facing numerous court battles and back child support and problems in the workplace. The attacker can sit back, smile, take pleasure in the fact that police can be summoned at any time, that the stunned creature is found driving past his own home. The attacker can count on support from feminist organizations, which will give counsel and advice and legal talent to make life miserable for as possible for the ousted mate. It costs the attacker nothing to go to the court clerk's office and file no-contact orders. Feminist domestic violence law require that clerks assist in getting the forms filled out and entered. The temporary documents become absolute legal mandates, even though no judge has approved the orders. With a temporary order in hand, law enforcement officers can be compelled to enforce the restrictions noted in the no-contact order. The breadwinner, regardless of the character of his behavior, whether good or bad, has become the whipping boy of an angry, distraught, or vicious spouse. The courts are not likely to rise to sort out, to protect the innocent and admonish or punish the aggressors. The male is most likely to be considered the aggressor, and the female to be the abused. The domestic attacker, once free of her husband's presence in the home, can then file for divorce and temporary child support orders. The attacker can then invite male replacements to occupy the bed of the father of the children. There are no enforceable boundaries regarding the number and character of friends the attacker can now entertain. Domestic violence exhibited by innocuous scenes of shouting or arguing in front of the children can be considered as reasons to terminate parental rights to a legitimate parent, but the presence of male companions to occupy what was once the father's place has not come into much disdain. Some effort is on the horizon to exclude convicted sex offenders of playing house. And in some ways, I applaud that type of thinking. I don't think it's going to get very far on a constitutional basis. There is a these thoughts here are generalized discussion of a number of situations that I've come across as people are being referred to me who need assistance with DHS. And I don't look at the disturbing situation so much as I do at the rights of the children to have access to their parents, and what is being done right judicially for the parents who seek our assistance. Because the parents have a right not to be invaded upon by the DHS. There needs to be probable cause, and there needs to be some judicial discernment um, invoked at some of these critical points. And quite often it's left up to a angry spouse who can get free advice from the court clerk to file papers without filing fees. By the way, the court can't understand why the number of filings for domestic abuse has risen dramatically. Well, it's risen dramatically because the feminists find this to be a mighty good tool, and it has no filing fee involved.
And the wife does not need any experience to file it either. She just walks in and they take over.
That's correct. I'm looking at one case right now where that was done, and no judge to look over to see if there was any kind of probable cause or if there was any good excuse to utilize the power of the court and the power of law enforcement against an individual.
Well,
But they do it anyhow.
This is just a theoretical question. So what if a guy gets abused and he's looking to get a no contact order? Or he has the same sort of help?
Presumably, he can get help, but guys are less likely to see themselves as crybabies than the women are. They can go in and say, look at this bruise on my arm. Well, the fellow probably has bruises in places that he would not want to exhibit before the clerk. Now, if he does have a right, however, under the law, gender is not really a critical factor here. However, I don't think you're going to find a man going in and saying, my 97-pound wife beat up on me. You see, the size of fellow that you are, Terrance.
Happens more than you know.
No one's really going to feel sorry for you if your 97-pound girlfriend beats up on you. You're a big boy now. And they might not have quite as much compassion for you as they would for that weaker part of the relationship. So I think it's rather interesting what has happened here. We do our best to help in the areas of expertise that we have. We cannot become therapists to help you out of your drug problem. We can't help a whole lot in counseling out of violence and divorce and so forth. They have all kinds of silly courses for that, like anger management. Anger management. How in the world did we ever get by for centuries without anger management? That makes me mad. Now we use public funds to make pussycats out of gentlemen. And I can't help but think that the anger management is another one of the feminist ideas of putting collars on the male species, male gender of the species. Well, let's see where we left off here. The stats indicate that it's the female who usually files for divorce. Maybe we're talking about a control issue here, are we? Where 70 to 80% of the divorces are filed by the female of the species? The female is not always the one who causes the difficulty, however. And of course, it's difficult to come up with a generalized discussion without recognizing, without. I think it's necessary that we recognize that not all of these are female based, or the blame can't be placed simply with the females. But when you look at the stats say they're the ones that are filing the divorce. Now, they're the ones who also consented to the marriage. Otherwise, there wouldn't need to be any divorce. Um, when we have the government programs and the courts and law enforcement that can offer, and child support orders and the domestic violence initiatives make the path to support the one who files for divorce. So if you're the one who is the first to file for that divorce, you can get all kinds of help. Divorce and separation and no contact orders issued as a result of the so-called domestic incidents automatically interfere with the right of the children to have maximum contact with both of their parents. You see, if the parents are separated, that automatically puts some burden upon the parents to be sure that the children have adequate access to both parents. What is really bad is when one parent moves out of state, and then you completely have denied full access to those children. And the children have a few rights in this whole thing, since they probably are not directly involved in the domestic dispute. They didn't cause the domestic dispute. Feminist activities and DHS personnel have counseled a spouse to deny the other spouse access to the children, even when a court has ordered visitation rights. This means that DHS is taking a risk of a contempt of court charge when they act in a manner contrary to a court ruling. And if that happens in your situation, I would consider you filing for a contempt of court. If a DHS worker tells you to do something, or tells your ex or spouse to do something which is contrary to the divorce decree. Well, so I think these DHS workers need to be called to account before the bar of justice. Do you think it'll ever happen? Well, we'll ask Terrance here in a moment to give us a reasoned response. DHS can intrude in many ways which cannot be supported adequately by public policy. Somehow we must turn around this infinite influence of the feminists and the Department of Human Services. Well, I've taken quite a bit of time here, and I would like to get into a film here that talks about a $3 million project that the state is in to keep children safe. It's called Community Care Project, and it only costs us $3 million to run it. It has a few problems, like 32 secret agents that's working throughout the state, but nobody knows who they are. Nobody has contact with them.
Are they sleeper cells?
They must be sleeper cells, because no one knows their names, no one knows what their educational background is, or whatever. But for an 18-month project, it's costing taxpayers $3 million. Well, let's now switch to the subject of the court system. And we're going to talk to someone who has a mighty good grasp of what happens in court. Let's talk to Terrance Walker.
Thanks for having me on once again, John and Don. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to share with people out there the true facts of what's going on with the judiciary here in the state of Iowa and throughout the country. I am Terrance Walker, the judge of the judges, self-proclaimed. Nevertheless, undisputed judge of the judges. That's my contact information. You might want to put on there amatterofjustice.org. That's one of the organizations I'm a part of, www.amatterofjustice.org, one of the largest coalitions of legal reformists across the country. I have a couple different subjects I'd like to talk about this week. There was, of course, the reference to the DHS and all that. I thought that was kind of alarming. We got $3 million we're giving to secret agents. Kind of scary. But when we're giving $12.7 million a year to a judiciary here in the state of Iowa, and our property, our liberty, and our, not only that, but our all of our other individual rights are not being respected, I think that we also should call on the judiciary to account as well as the DHS. And there's a lot of furor over the judiciary being expressed by not only Congress members and members of the public and different legal reform groups and organizations the past couple years, but there's also been some violent attacks. And I think what's coming to happen here is the chickens are coming home to roost. There was an article here by the Chicago Tribune staff reporter Matt O'Connor here on August 7th, entitled "Judge Warns Us About Stirring Fanatics, Identifying Threats to the Bench Should Be High Priority," he says. And I'll just paraphrase this a little bit. A veteran federal judge in Chicago warned Friday that political attacks on the nation's judiciary are fueling fanatics with personal grudges against judges. U.S. District Senior Judge Marvin Aspen said law enforcement needs to find a better way to identify threats to the judiciary, as well as better procedures to protect judges and their families. Quote, "And we really haven't developed those yet," Aspen said during a panel discussion on judicial security at the ABA's annual meeting in Chicago. About 60 people attended the discussion, many of them judges with security concerns on their mind in the wake of the murders of U.S. District Judge Joan Lefkoe's husband and mother in Chicago and an Atlanta judge earlier this year. Quote, "We must heed the wake-up call of recent events," said Aspen, former chief judge of the U.S. District Court in Chicago. Aspen said it took the bombings of the Oklahoma City Federal Courthouse in '95 for officials to get serious about court security and the September 11th terrorist attacks to make those issues even more mindful. Aspen also said judges face two types of threats from groups or individuals with no personal axe to grind against a particular judge, but looking to strike out at the system, and lone litigants indignant over court setbacks who represent potential loose cannons. And I'll just also say that Aspen said that Congress has set aside $12 million to install security systems in the homes of judges, but the appropriation was reduced to $8.5 million. The remaining $3.5 million was earmarked for other security needs of the U.S. Marshal Service. And until recently, he said, the Marshal Service has been more interested in sexy things, such as chasing fugitives like in the movies. By comparison, providing security in courthouses is boring as hell, he said. And I think that he wraps this article up by saying that Aspen is quoted as saying, "What we have now is really a wholesale attack on the judiciary," he said. Well, Mr. Aspen, I would like to say that for every action, there's a reaction. For every cause, there is an effect. If the judiciary had been keeping itself in check all these years, then we wouldn't even have all these problems. We wouldn't have the need, since the judiciary has ignored the property rights, the individual rights, and the liberty rights of individuals here in the nation, and has not largely gone unchecked here the past several decades and has erupted into a groundswell public outcry against the judiciary. I think that the judiciary should have been thinking about this a long time ago. It's a little bit too late, and I think that we need to also be focusing some of our attention not on the security, because you can put the judges in a bubble. If people are so mad about the judges and what they're doing, there's always going to be one or two fanatics out there that's going to get at them. So I think what the judiciary needs to really be focused upon is ensuring that each individual that goes into a courtroom or has an appeal has it decided fairly, not because they have more money or because they have a attorney that is more influential, but because they live in the United States of America, where the system of justice is supposed to be fair and by a constitution that is supposed to be one of the best in the world. Those are my 2 cents on that. Did you have any comments on that, John or Don?
That's a good discussion.
Yeah, I think that it's ripe for a discussion. We're so focused on security, and I thought this was so insane that we're pouring more and more and more and more money to the security. Well, where are the procedures? If we're going to have some procedures for security, why don't we have some procedures, put $12 million for procedures to ensure that the judges are doing their jobs, some protocols or procedures to evaluate and assess the quality. We don't want to have a judicial commission that doesn't do anything, doesn't out any judges for like 10 years, doesn't act on any of the complaints, but once every couple of years, and issues private reprimands to the judges. We want a system that is transparent, that everybody can see, that everybody knows is working. When we have these kind of statistics from these judicial qualifications commissions, which we complain these judges, and they're not doing anything, they're rejecting 99.9% of the complaints a lot of times, then we cannot say that we have procedures that are going to ensure the fairness of our proceedings. One other thing I did want to touch on, there is a lawsuit in Pennsylvania. Well, what is it all about? Pennsylvania legislatures increased their own salaries recently, and they also substantially hiked the pay of state appellate judges. I wonder why. Probably because they felt the lawsuit was coming. And they figured that they'd tie the judges on into it too, so they would have their back. Well, this comes from the Public Opinion Online, which is from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Article published August 6th of this year. These judges have a major conflict, according to this article. They stand to lose more than $15,000 a year if the law passed on July 7th is overturned. Taxpayers aren't likely to get a fair shake when the very judges hearing the lawsuit filed this week have a vested interest in the outcome. It's another example of how Pennsylvania government is mixed up. Well, I have a story to tell you guys out in Pennsylvania that Iowa government is mixed up as well. While individual judges are required to disqualify themselves from cases in which they have a substantial financial interest, the standard is different when all the judges on a court are affected by the same conflict, according to Ann Lazarus of Philadelphia, chairwoman of the State Conference of Trial Judges Ethics Committee. She addressed the judges' issue in a story published on the Patriot News of Harrisburg on Friday. Surely some objective panel could be found somewhere in the nation to hear cases like this one. This particular case ought to be an easy one to decide. And the clincher in this, folks, is many lawmakers are collecting their raises immediately as, quote, unvouchered expenses, extra pay equal to the raises, even though there's a constitutional ban on legislative salary increases taking effect during a legislature's current term. The Constitution is clear, and anyone who can read should be able to determine what the legislature did is unconstitutional. The legislature, of course, wants the deck to be stacked in its favor. The pay raise also includes a provision that would invalidate all of the pay raises if any part of the statute is ruled illegal. So any ruling against legislative raises would also eliminate the judges' raises. Not only does that clause stack the deck, but so do the quoted comments of the state's highest-ranking judge, Chief Justice Ralph Cappy. I say, if you have a judge named Cappy, your justice system must be crappy. Chief Justice Cappy has said publicly that he supports the raises and legislators who had the courage to take such action. Well, that's no surprise. If I was getting $15,000 more a year, I would support it as well. Cappy, by the way, received a raise of $22,352, making his annual salary of a whopping $176,800. And the judges' pay raises took effect on July 8th. There will be much more discussion of the legislature's actions, but those hearing the legal challenge shouldn't benefit personally from the outcome. This comes from us again from the Public Opinion Online, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And I just wanted to also remark that the legislature has also increased the judges' salary here, even though February or January, when they were complaining about the fact that the judiciary needed more money, they didn't say anything about the judges need more money. Well, lo and behold, when they get an extra $4.6 million added to their coffers, the judges all got salary increases. Wow, you know, this is what I'm talking about. This is why we have to be so critical of those in power, especially when they have actions like this, which are very questionable. Did you have a comment on that, Don?
Yes, you said the judges got a salary increase. Where did that money come from, and what was it originally going to be used for?
Well, I think it came from some folks out there. You, and you. Matter of fact, all of you. If you pay taxes, it came from all of you. So I think we better be mindful that those in power, we have to really watch them, because the Judicial Qualifications Commission definitely is not watching the judges, not as critical as we can and should. So until we get a new system to ensure the quality and fairness of the judicial office members that are in power, I think that, you know, it's good that we have a show like this, and I think that we ought to send them a message, which is why I'm a part of the organization and head of an organization called Vote Iowa Judges Out, which VJO, we call it, and we should start voting these judges out as they come up for retention vote, which Iowa is one of the few states that allows us to do that every 2 to 4 or 8 years, depending on the judge's rank. Did you have something to say, Don?
Yeah, to follow up on that comment about judges, I wonder why the judges just didn't go to the legislature and say, we need a 10% increase in our wages.
Well, I'm sure that was discussed, though we don't know some of the particulars of these.
I think they use
background
the other as a smokescreen. You know, we need it for these things. We need it for the citizens of Iowa.
No, it was actually ultimate humility on the part of the judges, not wanting to exhibit their brilliance and character, but they were probably afraid of exhibiting that humility and saying we really do need what is it? A servant is worthy his hire type of mentality, don't you think?
Yeah, but I think you're twisting that a little bit. You're trying to make a joke and use facts to back it up.
This is the ultimate of twisting, though. They called the pay raises unvouchered expenses.
Okay.
So they gave the judge some terminology so that they can basically distinguish that from a pay raise.
Okay.
But when it boils, everything comes down to it, though. more money is more money. You can't sit there and label it as uncovered expenses, unvouchered expenses, and then say that it's not a pay raise. Anybody with 2 cents would be able to see that that is a smoke screen designed to fool the so-called masses of the people so that they can't see what's going on. But you know, that goes back to what I always say: when we break the law, it's called a crime or a violation, and we're ticketed, fined, maybe even jailed or put on probation in some instances. However, in this case, where the legislators or the judges do it, it's called an interpretation. Just my 2 cents on the whole thing. Did you have any other comments, Don or John?
No, you're doing a good job, Terrance.
Oh, I appreciate that. But that's all I had for this week. I know you had to go over some sort of tape or something like that
Okay.
with the DHS. Thought we had some time to share that with the folks.
Good enough. Yes, $3 million for 18 months of working with families, some 600 or 700 families in Iowa. Now, these families are eligible for the assistance, and it's on a voluntary basis. They don't have to accept the services. We don't know what the services are, nor do we know who it is that's providing the services. We deal with one contractor who will do all these services statewide. It was such a big project that the University of Iowa wasn't interested in doing it because they didn't have the caliber of talent that it took. So we had to go to Perry to find the kind of caliber of talent to carry out this project. There's 32 counselors and so forth throughout the state, and but nobody knows their names. No one has seen them around the community. There's been no conferences or anything of this sort to go on. I'm going to play a tape, and perhaps you'll be able to see, because I've not been able to detect what it is they're doing. Eligibility is only those families that do not have a current child abuse report against them. I don't know why they're going after this crowd, except they say that if they don't have a child abuse report against them, there is a high, they are in a high likelihood of being drawn into the department. A lot of funny logic is going on here. The group that you're going to be seeing here on the videotape, and this was just a very recent meeting of citizens review panels, is supposed to be, because of the title of the committee, citizens review panels, there's supposed to be some citizens on it. And it was interesting that they noted that there aren't very many citizens. These are people who are in the business, whose business are perpetuated by the Department of Human Services. Another thing that you may be interested in is that there is built into that $3 million payment over 18 months some incentive, $500,000 worth of incentives. And the incentive is that the children who are involved, who have to be over 6 years old, because the DHS are going to be the experts on taking care of the ones that are under 6, the incentive is performance, and one of the performance measures is that the children are not reported for child abuse. Now, the people who are operating this system are mandatory reporters. Can you imagine what kind of a conflict might arise if you're a mandatory reporter working for this Perry group, and should I report something that will cost my boss $500,000, $500,000 loss to the contract? Well, in order to meet the standards that are set, you have to report, and you have to take the loss if you don't hit the prescribed figure for reporting. Well, let's take a look at the videotape. This is carried on in a conference room on the 5th floor of Blank Children's Hospital here in Des Moines. Jerry Foxhoven is the gentleman from the Child Advocacy area in the Iowa Department of Inspections and Appeals, leads this group. Very capable gentleman, but it seems as though the discussion here was to bring in these people who are doing these marvelous things for children, and to inquire as to what it is they're doing. You listen and see if you can tell what they're doing. I wasn't able to do that, so I don't know how citizens are supposed to review a $3 million project if they can't understand what it is that these people are doing. You check in with us and see what happens here. Let's see what.
I'm Kathy Noptovic, pediatrician, St. Luke's Child Protection Center.
St. Luke's Director of Child Protection Center, Sue Tipton.
Cheney Yates, Blank Children's Hospital.
Amy Bagwell, Broadmoor, Burgmaier.
It is Lantel, from Regional Science Director.
Bob Journal, retired police officer.
Jerry Foxhoven, Child Advocacy Board.
This introduction of the so-called citizens.
I'm the Project Director for Community Care through the Mid-Iowa Family Therapy Clinic.
I'm Jeff Terrell. I'm with the Department of Human Services here in Des Moines, and I manage the state's Quality Assurance and Improvement Unit.
Ray Blaze with the Polk County Attorney's Office.
Greg Hay, Polk County Attorney's Office.
Lindsay Williams, Cheryl Jones, Toma Regional Center, Child Health Specialty Clinic.
Martha Berkshire, Mercy's Child Advocacy Center in Sioux City. And Barb Small with the Plain.
Is there a certain way you want us to start?
Well,
or
you know
how do
what?
want us to
I think what we
approach
were looking for is kind of to have you tell us, first of all, kind of how this is going to work, how you envision it's going to work,
Okay.
what's going to happen, how do people come to you to begin with, and then after you've kind of given us a description of that, and maybe what you'll keep track of for outcomes or what you won't, then to tell us what you've experienced so far.
Okay. The gatekeeper into community care immediately is through a child protection assessment. So that is the only way in to community care. Families have had to have a completed child abuse assessment. So we have been up and running since March 1st. And so we do have some data that we've accumulated over the last 4 months. One of the things that was unique in our approach to community care really was to find a way to really embrace the family team meeting philosophy for those who are familiar with that, and really partnering with families and figuring out how it is we were going to find ways to reduce the risk for abuse and neglect that got them connected to the department for a child abuse assessment in the first place. And we wanted to do that in a way that was different than the traditional in-home family-centered services that the department has offered families for some time, which Mid-Iowa also offers. So we wanted to approach this in a really different way. And so what we've done and we were tasked with was to figure out how it is we accept referrals on a statewide basis in a pretty short turnaround time. And so we have done that by placing 32 care managers through those 32 care managers are employees of Mid-Iowa and employees of subcontractors that we have connected with throughout the state to make sure that we have coverage in all 99 counties. And to make sure that we were accessible to all families, we offer services in the family's home. We don't ask that they travel to us, we will go to them. When a family comes into as a referral to community care, there's one way in. A family has been referred to the department for a child protective assessment. That was accepted for assessment. That assessment's completed. At the end of that assessment, depending on the outcome, child protective staff have a decision tree they really follow in terms of if a family is eligible or not.
Would it have to be a founded?
No, actually, it has to be, if it's not confirmed, so the report was not confirmed, but there's perceived high risk when they do their risk scale. that family's eligible. If it's a confirmed case and it comes through as a moderate or high risk, that family's eligible. If it's a founded case, then they have to then decide, they have to jump through a couple other hoops, and one is that the child is over 6. All founded cases under the age of 6 are going to remain with the department. A founded case where a child is over the age of 6 and comes through as a low risk are families who are appropriate then to make a referral to community care. There's also a time frame factor where we really want the referral to be made to community care within a 45-day time frame from the time the department made their intake. And that really was a conscious decision by the department when we began this whole contracting process to make sure that referrals were made in a timely manner to really improve our ability to engage the family in services. Services are voluntary, so families are not required to accept community care. Once they're referred, everybody agrees that the family is eligible for community care services and they're referred to us. We are responsible, however, for that family in terms of meeting our performance measures, and I'll talk to you about what those 4 measures are in a minute. Once our care managers, we have 4 supervisors, clinical supervisors at the LIS or LMFT level across the state who supervise for the 4 quadrants. Those folks then make their decision in terms of care manager assignment. Once the care manager is assigned, they go out, they do whatever they can to connect with the family. Sometimes that's easier than others. Once they've connected with the family, they go out and we ask them to do really kind of we use a real triage model with the families in terms of those higher risk families. We ask them to get out in a much quicker fashion. We have a 14-day time frame that the department asks us to meet. We ask our care managers to meet that in 7. Less time if that family comes in as a confirmed and high-risk case.
Can I interrupt you a second? So if a referral is made, and you get the name and you make the contact, or they're asked, that's the way it works?
That's the way it works.
You guys make the contact?
We make the contact. The department is asking them, I might want to step back, the department is asking them to sign a release of information that says they agree to community care. So once the child protective staff has said, I think this, I'm getting to the end of my assessment, I believe this family is going to meet the criteria to make them eligible, I think they could benefit from those services, they ask them to sign a release so that they can give us and tell them they're going to give us their child protective summary, which is different. I mean, we're going to get their child abuse summary report, which is different for, usually those are not just sent out. So that's different. We get those through one point of entry. It's a email, community care at midiowafamilytherapy.org. That's the only way in. That's the only referral avenue for the department. They all go to that one point, and then they go on from there. So we make sure that we have some coordination.
To what extent are families educated, so to speak, by the department prior to the referral about this?
I think in all honesty, it kind of happens at varying levels across the state. We've just finished, the whole process really moved at light speed from October 8th when the RFP was let to when it was decided in January and we had to be up and running in March. I barely caught my breath. And some of the department staff are kind of in the same, it's real new. And so we've just finished going out statewide. Next week, I'm in Mesa City and Decorah on Monday, finishing kind of the last rounds of helping the department kind of get their hands around how it is we sell it. And I think some child protective staff have really grasped it better than others.
From the department's perspective, we've said that our primary responsibility is doing the assessment and then responding to those children and families where we found neglect or abuse to have occurred. So what we're trying to do to some extent is use the community care initiative to get in front of families who have some risk, but whose situation, the issues present in the family today, don't constitute the finding, the statutory criteria for neglect or abuse, to avoid those families' issues evolving to the point that they become more serious in the future. So our staff have made an assessment of the family, an assessment both of the presence or absence of neglect or abuse, as well as a more broad assessment of the family's condition and support and relationships. So our staff use a brochure that we've developed with Mid-Iowa as the community care vendor to illustrate what the program can do, what they're about, and how it will work. But the real secret is experiencing that and being able to talk from your own experience, how it works for me here, and being able to share that in a way that's real, and you make those personal connections. And we are very early in this process. This is a very new initiative. So it will take some time for all of our staff to develop the experience and the expertise to do even better with assessing those cases and figuring out when it really is a good idea, what really works in the future for us.
And we've really seen some who refer 80% of their eligible cases, and some who still have yet to make a referral.
The trick is the balance. You don't want to refer cases that don't really need it, or set up a scenario that is going to create a drain of resources where it really isn't focused on the desired goal, the results we're trying to get, but you do want to make sure that the families that might need that help, that seem to be the ones who would benefit from this investment of professional staff resource and coordination, that they get that chance for those services. So it's going to be a learning experience for a little while.
Is there an assessment tool that pretty clearly says this person should go or not, or is it more judgmental of the work?
We have a decision tree that they follow, that flows for them, and some questions that they ask themselves at the end of each assessment summary. That decision tree is there for them to see, and 3 questions that they ask in terms of, is the family willing, would the family benefit, and I'm not quite sure what the third one is.
What exactly, okay, so a child family gets referred to you, what do you do? I mean,
So-
what do you do? Do you do direct counseling? Do you do coordination? How do you, and how long do you serve the kids? And then how do, I mean, some communities had already a system where a child got in and they had a number of agencies that provide care. How are you interfacing with the current system in place in these communities where you have your coordinators?
That's a lot of questions.
Yeah, it is. But I'm curious because I have yet to meet anybody from Mid-Iowa in my community. So I'm wondering how you're...
One of the things that happens when we meet a family initially is we go out and meet that family in their home. We do an assessment. We redo the risk assessment that the department has done initially when they come in. We do another assessment called the Child Wellbeing Scale.
You've been viewing a presentation by a contractor who is taking on something called Community Cares Project for the Iowa Department of Human Services. They have 32 contractors or 32 individuals throughout the state who are assisting in this program. It costs Iowa taxpayers $1.5 million for this experimental project.
In-home skill development. It may be that we're connecting the family to community resources. Many of our families are already working with therapists in the community, with the extension office, with visiting nurses, with other mental health providers, a psychiatrist, a physician, whatever the issue is. And so we seek releases with the family to help coordinate what they're already